Thanks for joining us via Zoom. Is Justin Kenny this week on Inside the Zone, talking about sectional championship games here in Northeast Indiana, and we're going to start right off in 6A. We've got a big showdown, Warsaw at Carroll. Before we dive into that too much, tell me a little bit about what you thought of that Carroll victory at Penn, because when you take a look at the scope of the things in the postseason, in years past, our 5A, our 6A teams have not fared super well against perennial powerhouses from the Indy area or from outside Northeast Indiana. But this was a real statement win, I think, 35-7 over at Penn. What are your thoughts on that victory?
Just astounding to me. And it's a credit to Carroll for being able to get it done and how they did it. And talking to defensive coordinator Joe Rudolph after the game, he said, when we did scouting, we saw 6 or 7 plays that Penn ran really well. And we keyed on those 6 or 7 plays and completely took them away. And the performance that the Chargers put together last Friday, complete. I've never been so surprised with the result in a game in a long time. Not necessarily that Carroll won, but in the manner that they won, effectively pitching a shutout outside of that extremely short field that the offense was able to give one time for the Kingsmen. So tremendous job for Carroll. And I like their matchup a whole heck of a lot better this week at home against Warsaw.
Yeah, it's going to be our highlight zone game of the week, Warsaw at Carroll. How do you see this one playing out? Because Warsaw is one of those teams that runs the football and runs that Bart Curtis offense and does what they do really well.
They do it well when it works. The problem with Warsaw is when it doesn't work, when they take on a team that's able to limit the running game, then they have trouble. And this is where it plays into the strength of Carroll with their run defense, with that defense in general, is being able to get off the ball, particularly up front, and really create problems. They were able to do that with Penn, particularly on their defensive ends. And if they can do that again on Friday, I don't see Carroll having much of a problem. So for Warsaw, they do one thing really well, and if they can stop it, if Carroll can stop it, then it's advantage Chargers.
When you take a look at Carroll, how do you guard against being overconfident? I know it's sectional championship game, so you really shouldn't have to do that. But you're talking about, we just went on the road and beat Penn, and we beat the crap out of them. And now we've got Warsaw, who we probably go in thinking we're better than them. So how do you guard against that if you're the Carroll Chargers and make sure, because you have one bad Friday and you're out in the postseason?
Right. Yeah, and it's a team that they destroyed last year 36-0 in the playoffs. So you do have to guard against that complacency. But for anybody that's been around for multiple years on that team, you only have to go back to 2020 to remember when this team lost on the road to Warsaw in the playoffs. So if you're the Chargers, particularly that coaching staff, they don't have to go back very far to remind their players that Warsaw is a team to deal with and respect. So in that respect, I really think Carroll continues to play like it's on a mission, at least win a sectional championship and become maybe that first ever area team to win a 6A regional. And as long as they handle their business on Friday, they should have no problem getting a sectional trophy.
Conversely, what's Bart Curtis's message in practice this week? What are they focusing on? Because Carroll is going to be at home. Carroll's going to be probably favored in this one. They have to feel like, hey, man, people are kind of disrespecting us a little bit. We went 7-2 in the regular season and won a slobber knocker last week. Like, we're feeling good too.
4 straight wins for Warsaw, and it's all been becoming on the ground with that running attack. And it seems like every week they have somebody else kind of ascending to that title role as the top back. So for Warsaw, you're looking to play with your bread and butter here is to dominate on the ground and also limit the opponent on the ground. Those would be the keys for Warsaw. And at this point, they're playing house money. With house money, a lot of people thought they would lose to Elkhart anyway. So one surprise win, okay, they're going to try to make it 2 on Friday.
Let's move on to 5A. We got Northside, we got Snyder. This is going to be a game that I think people were looking forward to for some time on both sides. So when you watch this game, they met early in the season. Both of the teams are a lot different from when we saw them the first time around, and that was a great, a one-score game. So how do you see this one playing out now that both teams have had the entirety of a season to evolve and change some certain things, both personnel-wise, schematically, to get ready for this contest?
Man, it's 2 teams that are absolutely on a roll. 8 straight wins for Northside. That's the most wins for that program in a row since 1987. And it's been a great year, 8 straight wins for Snyder as well. And they took care of Dwenger in dominant fashion. I know people want to go back to week one and compare these two teams, but as you mentioned, Glenn, so much has changed over the last couple months with both of these squads for the better. Northside is a better team. I think they're more consistent. They make less mistakes than we saw earlier in the year. Snyder as well. That defense has come into its own. Gave up 36 points through the first, or actually 46 points through the first 2 weeks, and haven't given up that many the rest of the season. So for me, these are two teams playing tremendous football. Northside has an opportunity here, a definite opportunity. They can match up, but they have to limit penalties. They have to limit turnovers. They have to limit miscues. They have to play as well of a game, as flawless of a game as possible to have a chance to beat Snyder. I think for Northside, you're trying to pick up those chunk plays, but for me, this game is going to be decided on which team limits the mistakes, the turnovers, third down conversions, the little things, the short yardage positions. Those are the things this game's going to come down to. And for me, it's advantage Snyder in that regard. So Northside can definitely win this game, but I think its margin for error is a little bit smaller than what Snyder's is.
You take a look at Jonte Lambert versus that run defense for Snyder. To me, I want to see how that plays out because we've talked a decent amount about Jonte Lambert, but maybe he hasn't even gotten enough recognition just based on the type of season he's had. I mean, it was a few weeks ago he had set the Northside individual single season rushing record. I mean, I just feel like we talk about Tay, we talk about Dickerson, we talk about some of the other guys, and really he has just had a phenomenal season of high school football for Northside. But Snyder obviously knows that, and they'll be looking to gear and stop the run this week with Kurt Tittman and that entire defensive unit.
It's a credit to what Jonte Lambert has been able to do all season long, the fact that he's gone over 2,000 yards in this offense. So great job by the senior, in my opinion, on the short list for player of the year in this area this season. And it's definitely going to be a great matchup between him, that offensive line, and that defensive front of Snyder. And conversely, Northside's going to have to try to limit that Snyder offense as well, that Snyder rushing attack with Uriah Buchanan, Langston Level, and others.
Yeah. The one thing we've seen in years past is sometimes Northside doesn't have the horses up front to compete with the top level SAC teams. And with Jordan King and Mitchell Vargovich this season, they have some of those guys, and that's really been a difference maker for them.
Definitely. I don't think they get enough credit in what they've been able to do. The key thing with Northside in previous seasons, even as recent as a couple years ago, and not being able to match up in the trenches. That was a difference. They had the playmakers at the skill position players. So credit to that coaching staff for developing those guys. It always helps when they already have the girth on them, but they've been able to really put together very, very solid offensive and defensive fronts. And that's where it starts if you're going to compete in the SAC. And they've been able to do it to the tune of 8 wins at this point.
Let's talk about 4A Sectional 19. We got a Northeast 8 showdown. Leo, Columbia City. For the first time in a while, Columbia City didn't have to wait to the final minute to score the game-winning touchdown and against DeKalb. And Leo, that was a solid win. Going up to East Noble is no joke, especially when you talk about the rivalry between those two programs that has peaked really in the last few years. How do you see this one playing out? Because to me, when you take a look at the body of work, Leo is one of the most improved teams, in my opinion, from week one to this point in the season that we've seen here in Northeast Indiana.
Yeah, and it seems like a long time ago since we saw that 1-2 record for Leo to start the year, but they lost to Kokomo, Norwell, Columbia City. All three are still alive in the playoffs, and they get that rematch with Columbia City this week. That was a game that was reasonably close. 28-13 was the final, but it was closer than that through most of the game. And for Leo, incredible performance out of them last week to be able to go to East Noble. You know, some people gave them a little bit of an opportunity to maybe the Knights clip them last week, particularly with how that regular season matchup was. But Leo took good care of business, handled business. Now they have to go back to Columbia City where they lost just a couple weeks ago and try to knock off the Eagles. For me, with the matchup, it's Leo's defensive line, defensive front seven, being able to force Columbia City into some long down and distance situations and make Colton Piper beat you. I'm not saying he can't do that, but make Columbia City one-dimensional. It's easier said than done. Columbia City did a great job of doing that to Norwell in week 9 and beating them. That's the goal for Leo. That defense needs to make Columbia City go through the air to move the football.
And conversely, Leo's offense has really kind of found its legs. Max Leffler has had seemingly a great second half to the season. And then you'll see Kyler Decker hook up with Brock Schott pretty much for a touchdown every single week, it feels like. They've really evolved offensively, and maybe that's just the personnel finally getting a chance to shine with that big senior class that they had graduate last year, and also getting more familiar with Jason Dorfler's offense. But they've played really well. How does the Columbia City defense make sure that they're up to the task on Friday night against an improving Leo offense?
Well, I like the matchups for Columbia City with their defensive backs and lining up against Shot and the other weapons for Leo. But Brock is still a tremendous player that is a matchup nightmare in a lot of ways. Because similarly to what we said about Leo and having to play the run well, that Columbia City defense is going to have to do what it did against Norwell and really take away that running attack, try to limit Max Leffler, and make the quarterback for Leo beat you. I mean, at this point, is make the quarterbacks in this game, Kyler Decker and Colton Piper, beat you if you're the opponent. And I think this game really comes down to which one of those two plays better.
Let's talk a little bit about Norwell. I know it's 3A Sectional 27. They've got Yorktown. Yorktown struggled with Delta in the first round. Yorktown wasn't a resounding victory over Garrett in the second round. Norwell has done exactly what we thought Norwell would do. They've back-to-back shutouts, including one against Concordia last week. I imagine Norwell is just heavily favored, but what can they do in this game to get ready for hopefully what is a regional championship next week and make sure that they're ready to rock and roll as far as, a long postseason run goes?
Well, they'll get either Chittard or Garin Catholic next week. Those two teams play, and people will look at the records and say both 7-4. So Norwell should be in good shape, but we don't look at the records once you get past the sectional round and beyond at this point. And Norwell just needs to continue to play like it has. I continue to go back to that Week 9 game and say the absolute best thing that happened to Norwell for their postseason chances was to lose Week 9 and really have to face some adversity. So for Norwell, they've been able to handle that through the first 2 weeks of the postseason in dominant fashion. I expect nothing less coming up against Yorktown. Maybe a little bit closer game for longer, but the Knights should roll in this one.
As far as 2A Sectional 35 goes, it's kind of what a lot of people expected to a certain degree. I know Busco had a great record in the regular season, but you got Lures at Eastside yet again. This one, how do you see this one playing out? Because these are teams that are obviously they graduated, the two quarterbacks that we've seen in the last few years. You're talking about Carson Clark, who's one of the best statistically we've seen in the SEC, and Laban Davis, who's the best quarterback, I would guess, in East Side. So now those two guys are out of the equation in this meeting. How do you see this one playing out now that the teams are led differently and just have had a facelift, but yet are still successful as far as their own respective two-way paths go?
Well, while Laban Davis is gone, I don't see the game plan of Eastside changing very much in this game. They want to control the football. They want to keep the ball away from Bishop Lures. They want to grind out drives. They want to move the ball on the ground, and they want to score points and then play good defense. And that's what we're going to see with Eastside, whether it's Briar Muncie, whether it's Dax Holman, whether it's quarterback spot as well, this is what's going to come down to with Eastside. They want to beat you by controlling the football and running it down your throat. That's what they're going to try to do against Bishop Lures. They've had success in doing that in recent history against better Knights teams. Not saying that Bishop Lures is out of this one, but Eastside knows how to beat Bishop Lures. It's all about execution, and we'll see if they can do it come Friday.
I know Charlie Stansky's been dinged up. He looked pretty darn healthy against Busco last week, though.
Yeah.
But to me, this is a case where if you're Lures, you've got to figure out a way to utilize. One of the advantages that you have is Nicholas Thompson is going to be the best athlete on that football field. So how do you get him involved? How do you get him the football? Because Eastside, and this isn't just to Eastside, but 2A teams are going to have a heck of a time trying to match up and slow him down. You got to figure out ways to utilize what you've got, and Nicholas Thompson is one of the advantages that you have if you're Bishop Lures.
One thing I see so much at the high school level, Glenn, is coaches outthinking themselves. And when they have a dynamic athlete thinking, I'm going to use him as a decoy, yes, or, the defenses are going to command such respect on one player, it opens up other things. Feed your athletes, feed your elite football players the ball at the skill position spots. If I'm Bishop Lures, I'm getting Nick Thompson the ball every possibly way I can. I look elsewhere around this city, and I've seen in years past coaches them going, why don't you just get the ball to him? in space or wildcat or quick screens or whatever. Just get the ball in their hands and let them make plays. For me, for Bishop Luers, that's where it starts with Nick Thompson. Take advantage of the advantages you have in Eastside, and that's speed and athleticism. Take advantage of that. Don't go into this game thinking we're going to try to match Eastside up front with bulk and physicality, and we'll beat them at their own game. No, play your game, and you have a shot at knocking off the Blazers.
And I'll say Kyle Lindsey, when they had Austin Mack, that's what they did, especially
Yes.
later in the season. You saw the jet sweeps. You saw the Wildcat. You saw them use him in a variety of different fashions. So the onus is there. The experience is there. I just wonder if you're going to – I want them to just unleash Nicholas Thompson because he's a great kid. He's a special athlete. He's a Division I guy. And in two-way, man, there just aren't that many D1 guys. He's got that size, 6'2". He seems taller than that in person. Normally, guys are, you're like, oh, he's 6'2", but he's like 5'11" and a half.
Yeah.
He seems bigger. I mean, he's just a really good athlete, and that's just one of the absolute advantages you have as a guy like Nick Thompson. So hopefully they unleash the Kraken this week if you're a Luers fan. Eastbrook at Bluffton, I think when you face Bluffton's had a nice run. When it comes to Eastbrook, it's all about stopping the run, man.
Right.
How do you see this one playing out?
I think if you're going to play Eastbrook in the playoffs, this is the year to do it. It's not a dominant Eastbrook team. They have 3 losses, and we saw New Haven almost beat them earlier in the season. For me, I mean, even Huntington North of the first week of the season competed for Eastbrook. They gave up a lot of points. So if you're Bluffton, I think you feel positive about this game, at least hosting the game at home, sectional championship, have an opportunity for the first time in almost 30 years to win a sectional. So I'm not immediately counting Bluffton out at this point, but they're going to have to play some really good football. I think Anthony Cruz is going to have a huge game again on the ground like he did last week, and just trying to bottle up that Eastbrook rushing attack. Eastbrook's similar to Eastside in terms of trying to dominate the front, win the line of scrimmage, and run the ball down your throats. That's what Eastbrook's going to try to do. Bluffton knows what it has to do. It's simple, but it's almost very difficult to execute to try to take what their strengths are away.
Well, and if you're Bluffton, you have to feel – we've seen them – I think they've had a secretly better season than people realize.
Yeah.
And they've got more players in the backfield than people realize. And the confidence that they're playing with – I mean, no matter what round it is, anytime you go on the road in the postseason and win, that has to build your confidence. They go on the road to Tipton last week and come out with a victory. Like, they have to be feeling really good heading into this week if you're Bluffton. Like you said, they get somebody at home. Again, Eastbrook, we've seen with Jeff Adamson. We know what they do. We know what the game plan is. We've seen them go to state, but this doesn't feel like one of those teams where you're just like, oh, watch out.
I think it's the forgotten team right now in terms of going into sectional championships. We're talking about 2A. We're talking about Luers and Eastside. So Bluffton and Coach Kunkel saying, oh, look over here. We're still alive here playing for a sectional title on Friday. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they could at least compete with Eastbrook and maybe even clip them if the Panthers aren't careful.
Let's talk about 1A. We got Adams Central at Northfield. Adams Central, again, taking care of business against South Adams last week. And now you've got a Northfield team that's a little bit of an upstart. They won last week, 21-14. So obviously Adams Central is going to be heavily favored pretty much in every matchup that they go into, heading into even maybe the state championship game. That may be the only one this season that they wouldn't be favored in. But my goodness, what do you do if you're Northfield to make this a competitive ball game? I think you just kind of have to get some turnovers and hope for the best, right?
I think maybe you hope that the bus gets lost or something going out of Northfield. But in all honesty, in this one it starts in the first quarter. And if you can compete and stay in the game with Adams Central through the first 12 minutes, then maybe you have a shot to hang around. It was the first and foremost thing that Grant Mosier focused on last week with South Adams, and his team was able to keep Adams Central off the scoreboard for the first 6 minutes of the game, and then the floodgates unleashed. So even good teams, better teams than Northfield in relation to them, talk about South Adams, have had trouble slowing this Adams Central team down. So you need an un-AC-like performance to have any shot in this one if you're Northfield.
Yeah, we saw in the Southwood game, and they turned it over really early, gave them short field position, and then it was off to the races. South Adams had a fumble early when they were moving the ball through the air, and then that kind of turned the tide. And again, as you mentioned, kind of the floodgates open there. heading into this week, what are you most looking forward to as we wrap up our preview of Week 12? Because a couple of weeks ago when the draw came out, I was thinking, man, I don't know how many teams we're going to have advance deep into the postseason. And now I'm thinking, well, we're going to have quite a few. Like it feels like, and I guess maybe it starts in 6A with Carroll and that win at Penn, but
Yeah.
it feels like we have more teams alive now than I thought we were going to a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and well, all of a sudden we're thinking decent positively with Carroll, and maybe they can make a deep run, and like we're excited about that 5A matchup, and maybe look at Snyder or Northside, and whoever wins this game could make a deep run in 5A and even in 2A. Are we undervaluing an East Side or a Bishop Lures if they get through this week? So I think we're seeing some positivity heading into this Friday with some teams we didn't really expect, I guess, comparatively to a couple of weeks ago. But for me, you look at Bluffton hasn't won a sectional in 34 years. You look at Northside hasn't won one in 32 years. Columbia City hasn't won one in 29 years. Leo hasn't won one in 11 years. Which of these four teams can end a long drought on Friday? We know at least one. Leo or Columbia City have to win, but can Bluffton and North end long droughts as well?
All right. Well, we will see you out on the field on Friday night. But for now, he's Justin, I'm Glenn, and we'll see you next week on Inside the Zone talking regional championships.